He is kind of the main person in this and has been. And he will tell you why and how he came to this. So, welcome, Vladimir.
Hello, hello, Auroville. Good morning, very morning, early morning. It's 5 o'clock here in France, so where I'm talking from. I'm sitting here in Fontainebleau, far away from you, in the south of Paris. Mm, And it's quite unusual that we are connected through this means, through Zoom. Usually I run my classes through Zoom. Now we have this connection here. So the idea was to link two things, integral paradigm of knowledge with integral management, which is quite a task. But of course, it's not totally impossible, because integral management is connected to the integral view on things and integral psychology and integral yoga psychology especially. And in this seminar, we tried to bring this inner dimension and to show how it is necessary to be successful in managing our life. First of all, and then management in terms of business and companies and so on and so forth. So I will be repeating myself in some way because I want to give you the basics which would help you to, and us, well, help us to orient ourselves for this task, to bring this inner dimension to the integral management. So I will start my presentation. As you know already, and I did this presentation many times a year, every year we do similar presentation. This time I changed it a bit, but truly speaking, I will be speaking on the same thing. So Sri Aurobindo speaks about the knowledge, why knowledge is important, and what is the central aim of knowledge is the recovery of the self, of our true self-existence. Why recovery and not discovery? It's quite clear, because there is always within us, always present this inner self. So it can't be discovered. It's not something new that we should come to know. It is something we have intrinsic in us, and it has to be simply recovered. The recovery is a very interesting process. We can call it yoga. So, yoga chitta vritti nirodha. When we stop the cover, when we stop our activities of ordinary consciousness, this inner consciousness will come through. So the same in integral management. We have to learn to step back from the ordinary perception of things and remove this veil which is covering our inner self. And then we will have an inner contact. So in the Vedic epistemology, there are three different approaches, as you know. So I'm quoting from Sri Aurobindo here. In the ancient conception of the universe, our material existence is formed from the five elemental states of matter: the ethereal, aerial, fiery, liquid, and solid. And these are Pancha Mahabhutani, five great elements. Everything in this universe is made of these five elements. Everything that has to do with our material existence is called the elemental, adhibhuta. So when our consciousness deals with material world, then we call that approach, that epistemology, adhibhautic, adhibhuta. Pertaining to the elements, pertaining to matter. In the material, there move non-material powers manifesting through the mind force and life force that work upon matter, and these are called gods or devas. Everything that has to do with the working of non-material in us is called adhidaiva, that which pertains to the gods. And it's quite interesting because Sri Aurobindo tells us that the gods in the Upanishads are these faculties. Faculties of consciousness: seeing, hearing, speaking, thinking, feeling, and being in the body. There are 5 major faculties mentioned by Taittiriya and dealt with Upanishads throughout. If you have actually some questions, you can always interrupt because I can see and hear you, and it would be nice to have interaction. But within those non-material powers, containing them, greater than they, is the self, or spirit, Atman. And everything that has to do with this greatest existence in us is called the spiritual Adhyatma. So we basically have 3 approaches to our consciousness, or to our life here. 3 conscious approaches, 3 epistemologies, as it were. One is when we look at the world outside, other when we look within, and then the innermost connection. So we can have 3 different states of consciousness. We can be engaged in outer life, forgetting the inner. We can be engaged in inner, forgetting the outer. And we can get into the innermost connection, forgetting everything, getting into trance, as it were. Or we can connect all of them, 3 of them, into one perception, or into one action of consciousness. And that's what we call integral. Integral paradigm of knowledge has to connect 3 levels of Adhyatma, Adhidaiva, and Adhibhuta, which is quite a task. So here they are, these 3 levels. Adhyatmic is the innermost, central, Adhidaiva is next, and Adhibhuta is the surface of our consciousness, the periphery. Sri Aurobindo speaks that actually they are connected, and we are always connected, and we can have this power or this capacity to connect them always, because they are connected. Only we separate them in our mind. The unknown is not the unknowable, says Sri Aurobindo. It need not remain the unknown for us, unless we choose ignorance or persist in our first limitations. So when we persist in these limitations, then we will have this separation. For all things that are not unknowable, all things in the universe, there correspond in that universe faculties which can take cognizance of them, and in man, the microcosm, these faculties are always existent and at a certain stage capable of development. So we basically have faculties corresponding to everything what is available in the universe. We can know everything. We may choose not to develop them. Where they are partially developed, we may discourage and impose on them a kind of atrophy. We can stop their development. We can prohibit us to go in that direction. But fundamentally, all possible knowledge is knowledge within the power of humanity. So, basically, if we turn within or without, we can turn without our consciousness and see this world as objectively existing. So to say, scientific approach, we look at the material world as the real, existent, and only existent world, or we can turn within, and then we lose the contact with the outer world and become totally determined by our inner perception and remove ourselves from the world, become Mayavadins, become those who believe that the world is a Maya, illusion, and it becomes an illusion to us. There is a passage in Savitri when Savitri and Satyavan meet for the first time. Satyavan tells her that he tried to connect these two views, one within and one without, and never could succeed. Every time he found nature and concentrated on nature, he forgot about the spirit, disconnected from the inner world. And every time he connected and focused on the inner self, the nature disappeared. And he says, now, because you are here, he calls her the golden bridge, that these two views can be connected. So the mother played that role to connect the inner and outer. In the Upanishads, the view is integral in the way that they didn't want to look either outside or inside. Though these views are described there, it is said that Rishi closed his eyes, closed his ears to the outer world, and turned his consciousness within. He turned his faculties within to see the inner world. But he disconnected from the outer. But Upanishads propose a very interesting solution. It is to make these faculties, which look either without or within, to allow the inner look of Adhyatma to come to the surface. And for that, they have to be turned without, but receiving the look from within. They have to become consciously passive, as Sri Aurobindo says, consciously passive and receptive of the inner self. To become that, our faculties have to reject, refuse, or even reject. Rejection is first. They have to reject to be self-considered, self-centered, seeking their own self-satisfaction. They have to reject their ego perception. Our faculties are always searching for enjoyment. They always want to get this self-satisfaction. And they have to reject it and to become consciously passive and perceptive of the inner self. They have to turn within without totally turning within, but staying without, connected to the outer world, and allow the inner perception, the inner light, the Brahman behind them to come to the surface. And the description is given in the Kena Upanishad, where these faculties are depicted in this way, that it is not by the speech that the Brahman can be spoken of, because it is because of Brahman that speech is speaking. It is not by the eye that the Brahman can be seen, but it is because of Brahman the eye is seeing. It's not by ear that you can hear of Brahman, but it is because of Brahman the ear is hearing. And because of the mind, by thought you cannot think of it, but it is because of him, of it, because it's the spirit, the mind is thinking. the feeling is feeling, and the body is living. It is because of it, behind it, everything exists and acts and functions. And these functions cannot know him directly, but they can allow him to go through. They are the intermediaries. They will permit, if they want to, but for that they have to reject their self-satisfaction and allow him, the spirit, the Brahman, the creator, the consciousness of this creator, to come to the surface. This was the ancient yoga. The difficulty is quite obvious for all of us, because we have to reject our self-satisfaction and to receive the inner perception of the self. In the meanwhile, when we reject our self-satisfaction, we find it very difficult to maintain, because we are used to get our senses satisfied. That's the only thing what we do in our life. We always run for the satisfaction of our senses, whatever it may be, in thought, in vision, in hearing, in feeling, in emotions, in sensations, in the body. We always want pleasure for these senses. Now to move away from it is quite a task. Yeah? Why should you do it? It means that you would not feed your senses with an ordinary satisfaction. So you should have some inner compensation from the self, from the spirit. Some of us who have these glimpses of the spirit, they know the delight which is coming through. It's much greater delight than all the self-satisfaction senses can give. But unfortunately, the spirit cannot be constantly present. Because our senses are not used to receive its light. And so, as Sri Aurobindo says, it comes with flashes, in glimpses. Once it comes in flash, we receive this delight and we are ready to live only for it. But then it doesn't come. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 1 week, 2 weeks, 1 month, nothing comes. And then our senses turn back to the ordinary self-satisfaction, because they cannot bear that lacuna, that gap, doing nothing, getting no delight. So that's where we are. And that's why yoga sadhana is so difficult for us. But the connection should be done, if I were to draw this picture, from Adhyatma, straight lines to have to go to Adhibhuta, connecting all the levels into one stream. So our faculties have to become intermediaries, or they have to become the channels of the inner being towards the outer self, and connect both, bridge both. I took picture from Matthias' presentation. You will see his pictures in other presentations also, which is also describing it from the psychology point of view, the same 3 levels. You can see that on the surface we have behavior and objective knowledge, the knowledge about the outer self, what we call scientific knowledge. And behavior also. We examine our behavior. We think that through behavior, we may know about our inner self. Then there is a surface nature, which is a little deeper. That is when we reflect upon ourselves or our feelings from the objective world. We turn within from what we see. We want also to reflect on what we see and understand how what we see connects to us and the world. And that is the subjective knowledge, which is determined by objective knowing of ourselves. And then there is inner knowledge, or direct inner knowledge, where we know how senses or the faculties of consciousness function within themselves, as it were, not reflecting upon the world so much, but reflecting upon their own functioning. It relates more to the pure reason and examination of our inner functioning. And then we have a true being, the Adhyatmic approach, or the self, which is unborn self within us. So you see, Purusha is the Adhyatmic, and Prakriti starting from Adhidaiva towards Adhibhuta, all the levels covered with Prakriti. Our faculties of consciousness are the projections of Purusha into Prakriti, according to Sankhya. When he, Purusha, attends to Prakriti, he projects his consciousness, his faculties into her, and she manifests them in this format of the Adhidaiva and Adhibhuta.
Vladimir,
Yes.
picture the psychic being and the soul. The psychic being, the psychic and the soul.
Yes, we are not distinguishing them here, but we will make the distinction in a minute. I guess it will answer your question, the difference between psychic being, soul, and self. Basically, psychic being is the deputy or the projection of our unborn self, of Purusha in a way. So the Purusha, the universal self, the unborn self, through his faculties, projecting them into Prakriti, recreates himself in the Prakriti. And that recreation of him within Prakriti is the psychic being. So it will be slowly built and born there within. I will skip this slide, it's not important. I'm coming to this slide which may explain that question, the difference between psychic entity or psychic being, soul, what we call self, Atman, and manifestation of Atman in the Adhyatmic sense. This is again the slide from the article of Matthias. I find it very useful because it explains this, the relations of the inner and outer self in terms of integral psychology. So look at this. Yes.
Excuse me, can I ask you a question? And this goes back a couple of times earlier story. You have said the major lacuna is rejection. Right?
Yeah, wait a minute. You're very far away. Can you just either speak louder or get microphone or something?
Yeah, I have a microphone.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes. Sorry, because the either my sound is not very high. Wait a minute. I will try to make it higher. Okay.
Okay, you talked about rejection as the major lacuna.
Yes.
Now, in this scheme of things, where is the aspiration, grace, surrender, and faith? Because just by rejection of the lower nature, it is not that. I think it has to have rejection not of desires and everything. It has to be desire of egos. It has to be selfish, be selfish. So I don't know. I need some clarity on that. That the only lacuna is rejection. There has to be aspiration. There has to be surrender.
Of course, yes. Oh, well, I was not focusing on the rejection, though this is the formula given by Sri Aurobindo, rejection, aspiration, rejection, and surrender. Aspiration must be there before rejection can be made. So the the faculties of consciousness should aspire before they make a rejection. Otherwise, how can they make a rejection altogether? So I agree with you totally. So for the lack of time or focusing on the scheme of things, I just didn't cover everything. Cannot be simultaneously saying everything. But yes, absolutely. The aspiration must be there within the faculties, wanting to have the spirit, wanting or surrendering themselves already, seeking this surrender to the spirit. Otherwise, how they can reject at all their self-satisfaction? It would be impossible. So that's why we fall back, because our aspiration to find the spirit and to allow it to come to the surface is weak. So our rejection will not work. It will stop working very fast. And our aspiration will become very weak because we do not have this constant experience. Or we become some kind of hypocrites, which is also possible. We will speak about the spirit and do something else in our life, which is the major case, by the way. All of us are attracted to this ideal, but our life is not following it. It follows many different paths and many different egoistic ways of living and mixtures of things. Once in a while we get a glimpse or experience of some inner presence, and we are admiring it and longing towards it. But in the majority of our cases, and we are kind of in between these worlds. We are going back and forth. We are falling back into ordinary life and and remembering this spiritual life coming back. So that's why aspiration is so important. We have to aspire. We have to remember and offer. We must connect constantly and always coming back to this exercise to reject our self-satisfaction and to aspire and surrender to the spirit, our faculties, which is quite difficult to do, even if you have an experience or have many experience. Even then it is difficult to do because it is not constant. Would it be constant, that would change everything. Yeah. But since it is coming in flashes, then there are gaps in between. This is the gap I was talking about. The gap between experience and other experience. What would you cover it with? What would you do in that gap? You become an ordinary person. Can you maintain the contact with the inner self? This is the sadhana and the difficulty of it. I hope it is clear, yes, what we are talking about. Yeah? Right?
I have a question.
Yes.
What you've been talking about is the conscious offering and aspiration. But there is a connection, even when we are unconscious. How do we see this inner world working on the outer world in ordinary life?
Well, about ordinary life. Our ordinary life should become extraordinary, and in a sense that that our perception has to change. It will be ordinary in the action. It will remain the same. We will go to work. We will do the same. We will live the same life. But the perception of it, it will change. We will see totally different things and consider the things to be important differently. We will see the importance of life in a different way. It will be for us an expression of that inner self. Without it, without that touch of the inner self, the life would lose for us any value and meaning. As such, life without the spirit has no much value or meaning. For the person who has this inner perception, who brings this inner life to the surface, inner light to the surface, then this contact will be everything for us. It will give us the meaning of life. It will give us the satisfaction of life. It will bring us the delight which our senses want. Our senses want the satisfaction. And the real satisfaction comes only from the inner connection, because there is the universal source, the universal origin of these faculties, where they are totally satisfied. Now, if they get that satisfaction, then we are successful in our yoga. Then we don't need any more to worry. We will be totally connected to the spirit. And then everything what we live and do outside will be connected to the spirit. Then aspiration, rejection, and surrender would not be necessary, because it will be achieved, realized, done. Then our path becomes the sunlit path. It becomes easy, and sadhana becomes totally easy. It would be impossible for us to deviate from it. It would be impossible for us to go back to the ordinary way of living. All right. So this is what I wanted to show you in this scheme. Is quite interesting also. You can see I added to it at the Adhyatma, Adhidaiva, and the Adhibhuta levels. So Adhibhuta is our outer mind, outer vital, and outer physical. It is our faculties turned without. And turning without, they build something what we may call ego. You see ego here on the surface? So it is our ego self, which is built within the nature by the faculties turned without. So once our faculties are looking for the satisfaction from the outer world, they build that what we may call ego sense. But behind them there is an inner being, so to say, the inner worlds of these faculties. There is the inner mind, inner vital, inner physical even, and subconscious. Subconscious being is even below, underlying all of them, holding all of them, these inner worlds. The inner mind is a huge realm. It's a universal mind realm with all kinds of forces and forms and capacities and faculties. The same with the inner vital. This is the whole universe behind the vital. So our vital, our feelings, sensations, and emotions are only the projections of that inner ocean of force which is there behind. And even our physical has the inner domains, deep domains. So, and all these are determining our outer behavior, or our outer look at the world. But behind them, there is the self which sustains all of these formations. Behind the mental worlds, there is the mental self, Manomaya Purusha. Behind the vital worlds, there is the vital self, Pranamaya Purusha. And behind the physical, there is also physical self, Annamaya Purusha. They are also called Atmas. Annamaya Atma, Pranamaya Atma, and Manomaya Atma. So this is Atman made of the mind, the vital, and the physical. Atman means self. Now, I made a connection here, the arrow going from Atman to these selves, because basically they represent Atman in our nature. It's quite interesting. It's Purusha. He puts here, you see below the line, that this is the Purusha's realm. But truly speaking, that's already on the brink of, or on the edge of bringing the contact of the inner self with the outer nature, with our inner nature, sorry, in this sense. So we can see that Manomaya Purusha is actually already embodied here in the sense of our own mental perception. And the vital self determines all our sensations, feelings, and emotions. And the physical self determines our physical bodies and sense of the body. So here I could have added one more, which could be supramental. Yeah, and these would form these four different formations. What is interesting about these four, physical, vital, mental, and supramental, or we can say Atman, mental Atman, vital Atman, physical Atman, that in the Veda they are mentioned as Chatushpad. Dvipade, Chatushpade, Veda would say, for the two-legged, two-footed and four-footed beings. Now, this is the four-footed being. It has 4 feet or 4 levels of consciousness: supramental, mental, vital, and physical. The whole nature is evolving from the physical towards supramental. So we moved into the vital realm. The whole world outside, all animated nature is the vital nature, embodies the vital nature, all animals, human beings. And then we move to the mental realm, which human beings represent. We represent the formation of Manu, of the thinking mind, matrix of the thinking consciousness, or mental consciousness. And then we move towards supramental, higher. So the whole nature evolves by this Chatushpad. But Dvipad, Sri Aurobindo says, is this connection, Atman and psychic entity. There is only this, it makes importance for human beings, the connection of the unborn self above the head, and about the connection of it or projection of it into our inborn self, the soul or psychic being. Now, Matthias is writing here psychic entity, which is much more correct. The psychic being is not yet formed. It's only an entity, a projection, a presence. There is a psychic presence in us, but not the being. The being will be formed through the interaction with all these levels over a long period of time, incarnation after incarnation, that the psychic being will go through them, form first psychized, mental, vital, and physical being, and come through to the surface, and will take place of this ego here. You see? The innermost will become the outermost. It will go through, shine through all of them and come to the surface. And instead of ego here, there will be a psychic being. Then it becomes a being. Then it possesses its own instruments of self. It will have all the instruments or the faculties of the mind, of the vital, and of the body under his control. So you can see this Dvipad and Chatushpad, very beautiful, because in the Veda it is a very mysterious statement, and it is always wrongly translated. Dvipad as two-footed, translated as a man, man because the man is on 2 feet, and Chatushpad as on 4 feet we have the animal. So the animals and human beings, it's usually being translated, but truly speaking, Sri Aurobindo adds another dimension, another interpretation of it. And this is the unborn and inborn self for man, and 4 selves which are evolving, Chatushpad, for all nature, including man. So we have this 2 dimensions in us. One is of this psychic entity, which is bringing the supreme presence to the world, and other is the instruments of consciousness. It's important for us because we will be dealing in the integral paradigm with these 2. Yeah? One is about the faculties of consciousness, which belongs to Chatushpad. It is about our mental and vital faculties, and other is about the psychic verities or faculties or qualities, as we call them. Sometimes they are called also life principles, such as sincerity, humility, and so on. So in the another slide, it is given in more details, which could be also interesting for us to see. The same story, the same vision, but there are also chakras included here. There are more detailed explanation of the levels of the mind, vital and physical. Inner physical, unfortunately, is given only 1, but truly speaking, there are also 3 levels of the physical. So there are 3 levels of the physical, 3 of the vital, and 3 of the mind. Mother speaks about our physical chakras. Here we can see only Muladhara chakra on the level of physical. Do you see the? I can increase the picture. So you can see that Muladhara is only 1 because we do not know how to name other chakras. But truly speaking, there are 2 chakras below Muladhara, Mother says. One is on the levels of the knees, other is below our feet. So we have Muladhara as the mental, physical. Then we have on the level of the knees the vital, physical. And below the feet we have physical, which is the most dense and very strange consciousness, very narrow consciousness, where we cannot find much of awareness. So there are 3 times 3 chakras, basically 9, which in the Veda they call Navagvas, 9 rays, the rishis of 9 rays, when all the chakras, all the levels of consciousness were open. And there are 3 more which are going beyond Sahasrara. Mother speaks about 12. Above Sahasrara there are these 3 major chakras of overmind. This is intuitive mind, overmind, and supramental overmind. Before the supermind, there are 3 higher chakras. So altogether, this is the system, which is very complex. But it reflects the same thing. Jivatman or Atman has a projection directly to the 3 Purushas, or 4 Purushas, let us say, including Vijnanamaya Purusha, including the supramental self, which is Atman itself. Though he here writes that existence, consciousness, bliss, Satchitananda is Atman's level, which is true. And for the supermind, there is no level. But supermental self is also available. Only we do not know about it. So it would be nice to put one more level here on the supramental self as the link world from the transcendental to this one. So it's much more elaborate scheme, and it's very good to meditate upon this scheme and to understand how our inner nature is connected to the outer self.
Vladimir, can you repeat again? I didn't got it. The 3 level of the physical. I think it is the most unknown part. It was in Muladhara, no?
Yeah, Muladhara is what we know as the physical chakra, which is at the bottom of our spine, from which the Kundalini Shakti rises. Yeah? But this is at the bottom of our spine. There are 2 more chakras, Mother says, on the level of the knees. They don't have names, because they are unknown to us. And other is below our feet. And these 2 also belong to this physical self, and come to the most physical world, the physicality of the physical. Muladhara is more mental physical. It has this power of the mind within the physical, whereas on the level of the knees, it is the vital physical, which is unknown to us, the vitality, the life of the physical form, and finally the physical itself, about which we know very little as such. We have no access to it with our consciousness. And these are, of course, occult planes, and about which we have hardly any idea. But we get it from the mother, so we know about it from her.
I found it interesting because I recognize that also now so many problems, so many persons have problems with knees. So it comes very much up everywhere. And recently, 2 weeks ago, I stepped Auroville forms on my
Absolutely.
and it was so painful.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. When we get older, we have knees, legs, they are becoming weaker and weaker. Did you notice it? Legs are giving up first, not any other organ. Hands, of course, they grip with the fingers. Here we have a problem. But with the legs, especially knees and feet, these 2 levels, they give up first. And when we get older, when our body gives up or becomes less and less flexible or perceptive, it is on these levels we realize that we don't have force in our knee and our legs.
That's also because we are dominantly in one plane of existence, so we simply forget others. It's also that one plane of existence connects to an inner world, and somehow the others are somehow oppressed or kept out. That's why we need to keep coming out of the contact, because we need to return to the body, to the mind. We need to have all parts of our beings connected. I think that's part of the problem, right? That a kind of favorizing aspect of you connects to the inner world, and the others are forgotten, the others are left out, because they're more difficult, obviously. We are not able, is that correct?
Yes. And there is a problem fundamental, because either we go to the physical and forget the inner, or we go to the inner and forget the physical. So we have both ways problems. So wherever we go, there will be a problem.
We handle those problems because of that connection we have.
Right.
But the problems never go away.
Right.
I like the fact that we are all together here, because we have a map, let's say, of our existence that is given. But we are all here together to figure out again and again and again. It's never an ending. The issue is never resolved till everything is resolved.
Right.
So I really like it that we can all interact. And for example, I've seen this before, and I have also feel I don't have a clue. So for example, if we say inner middle vital, for example, could you say something about or another inner dynamic mind as opposed to a human mind, or that you have some inkling of what that could mean?
Right. It relates, you see, he relates them with chakras, so it can give you an idea immediately where the level of, from what level it comes. The inner dynamic mind comes from Ajna chakra, the third eye, yeah? Or inner illumined mind comes from the Sahasrara, the over the head consciousness. And Vishuddha comes from inner expressive mind of the Vishuddha chakra, our mental expressive center. All these centers are inner higher vital, for example. It is our Anahata chakra, the heart chakra. Then the middle vital, or that very seat of all our impulsions and feelings, as it were, not emotions, but feelings, is Manipura, the navel chakra, or the of the seat of all our vital problems and solutions, most probably. Anxiety.
Yeah, but the inner vital is not necessarily, it's more of a existential vital, right? The surface vital makes it anxiety and things because we lose the contact with the.
Well, that is the seat of all our anxieties and all our jealousies and fears and desires and so on and so forth. All these impulsions come from that seat because that consciousness operates by that particular form. By the way, when he says inner, it means sukshma, subtle body. Yeah? Within the subtle body, all these chakras can be seen or experienced. It's not within the physical that we can have access to them. So we need to have the experience of the subtle body. And there are inner worlds there, and there are these centers within us. We are talking about this body. Within this subtle body, there are centers which represent the whole universe. Yeah? The whole universe is, all the levels of consciousness are projected into this particular frame, and they are available as these centers. So we can have access to all of them, from the highest to the lowest. We connect the highest and lowest within this body, within this subtle body, within these three Purushas. Look at this microcosm. What a beautiful creation. We are not cut off from the whole vision, from all the power. We are connected to it.
Okay, Vladimir. You have come to the end of your time.
All right. I hope, yes, what I wanted to say, I will conclude briefly, is that the inner worlds and outer worlds can be connected through activity. And this seminar is dedicated to this. How? Through activity, being active outside, on the surface, dealing with our ego-centered, so to say, perception of things, to bring the innermost presence and to use it and to utilize it to change our surface. How to make that bridge, how to make that connection through activity, through everyday life. Auroville was dedicated to this ideal, to make that bridge, to make the connection of the inner and outer. So it's very appropriate to speak about this in this format of integral management. Okay, thank you for this, for listening, and I'm very glad that we could make the connection, and all the best to you in your seminar. Yeah.
Thank you, Vladimir, and we see you again tomorrow.
Yes, see you. Bye.
Bye.
God.